If you're watching this video, chances are your game master sent it to you, in which case, they're just awesome, aren't they? They do so much for us. Buy them a pizza next time you play, will ya? Watching this video also means you're probably about to start playing Abomination Vaults and want to prepare for it. Lucky for you, that's exactly what I'm here for. This video is going to be broken down into two different parts. The first half of this video is going to be lore focused. I'm going to be telling you where in the world this adventure takes place, give you some information about the region and its people, as well as some events that have led up to the adventure. Everything I talk about in this section will be universally common knowledge, so don't worry about me giving away any spoilers or potential plot twists the campaign may hold. This section of the video is strictly to give you inspiration on how you want to build your character based on where you are and why you're there. The second half of this video will be mechanics focused, and there will be some very minor spoilers, though none of it will be direct. I will be alluding to various classes and skill checks that might be more useful than others, as well as giving warnings on what to avoid playing. For example, if an adventure is full of creatures that are immune to precision damage, you might not want to play a rogue or a swashbuckler. I might name some enemy types and common skill checks, but I won't be saying anything specific. By the way, in the last video, I asked y'all to subscribe to the channel, and oh my god, did you? I know you get sick of hearing people asking you to subscribe, but hey, it works. So if you don't mind, scroll down and hit that subscribe button. Maybe leave a like while you're down there. It helps out so much, and I really appreciate it. Also, Sinclair's Library.
Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time.
Shut up, Gandalf! I wanted to update y'all and let you know that we have been non-stop hard at work pumping out content for Sinclair's Library. A lot of things are taking longer than we expected because we were all optimistic virgin Kickstarter noobs, but everything that has been finished is looking incredible! I just shared this picture of our Spellbreaker archetype on Twitter, an archetype all around resisting and even canceling magics, and there's so much more to come. New eidolons, new subclasses, new classes, and so much freaking more. On behalf of the entire Sinclair's team, I want to say thank you all for your patience, and we can't wait to show you everything that's ready once we reach the playtest stage. Thank you so much. With all of that said, strap in, it's time to learn about the lore of Abomination Vaults. At the center of the Inner Sea region is a large landmass known as the Starstone Isles, named for the artifact utilized by the dead god Eredin to raise it from the waters below centuries ago. One of these islands, the Isle of Kortos, is known as the home of Absalom, the city at the center of the entire Inner Sea region. The weather is temperate and comfortable on the Isle of Kortos, though its magical nature allows a plethora of different environs to exist on this one small landmass, such as the bountiful plains of the Swordlands, the primordial forest of the Immenwood, and the frozen peaks of the Kortos Mounts. While Absalom is easily the largest city on the Isle of Kortos, there are so many other little settlements around it, the port town of Otari being a notable one. Otari lies to the southwest of Absalom and is only home to a population of about 1,200 people. While most of them are humans, there's a pretty equal percentage of all non-human ancestries. Of course, you've got your elves, dwarves, and whatnot, but there's a chance you'll find almost any kind of people in Otari. Because they're so close to Absalom, only about a day or two's travel away, it's not uncommon for them to see travelers visit their humble little town, though they do look on these comfy city folk with a little bit of disdain. Much like its diverse people, Otari offers a surprisingly diverse amount of services, everything from adventuring gear to general goods to even magical items of some repute. There's also a rumor that a thieves guild is currently operating underneath Otari, though even calling it a rumor might be giving this thieves guild too much credit, because anybody who's even visited Otari tends to know about the Osprey Club. They're not exactly great at keeping it hidden. Otari's big claim to fame is its lumber shipping industry. Receiving wood from the northern forest of Imminwood, it then ships that wood either by road to Absalom or by boat to a ton of different civilizations across the region. The other notable feature of Otari is the Dawnflower Library. This massive library also doubles as a temple to the Dawnflower goddess Sarenrae, though it does include smaller shrines to other gods like Caden Kalayan, Erasteel, and Gozra. Over the past years, a common wives' tale has wound its way through Otari. Every civilian and citizen of Otari knows of Gauntlight. A few miles out of town, towering over a cliffside, lies a decrepit lighthouse known as Gauntlight, surrounded by the ancient ruins of its old inhabitants. Though since it's been abandoned for over 500 years, ruins is the only way to describe them. Even the land around these ruins has been so ill-kept that it's become a marshy swampland known as Fogfen. Occasionally, adventurers and thrill-seekers would wander near the ruins of Gauntlight, hoping to find something of exceptional value, though rarely was anything actually found, though they do report strange sounds and smells. Sometimes people would report the chittering of small creatures almost sounding like laughter, or the gurgling of much larger creatures. Some even report smelling the stench of death itself wafting from the ruins. The adults of Otari have begun using these stories as a way to keep their children in line. Most children have at least heard that beneath the Gauntlight, the monster Belcora resides, who will creep into town and devour the naughty children who don't obey their parents. Recently, however, one citizen of Otari claims to have seen the lighthouse aglow for the first time in centuries, and they believe something sinister may be afoot. Now, aside from Absalom and Otari, there are a few other notable settlements nearby that your character could potentially hail from, one of which would be Galamzur, the dwarven mining settlement to the southwest of Otari, Diabel, farther west than that, being a large but flooded port city that has almost become more water than land, but does boast an interesting trade reputation as they have access to some rare metals both in the surrounding hills and the ocean floor by them. Maravon is the logging settlement found within the Imminwood who is responsible for cutting and sending the lumber to Otari. Carrick to the northwest, along with having an abnormally large harbor that can house a number of trading ships, is also found right within the Swordlands, a healthy, bountiful place of harvest. However, their harvests are getting weaker and weaker each year as the Welt encroaches upon them. Finally, across the water to the north is Absalom's home of their naval military, Escadar. But at the end of the day, Escadar is a sailor's town. Brothels, gambling dens, bars, and more line the streets of Escadar. A character can easily hail from any of the settlements I've mentioned here, but because Otari is so close to Absalom, really any character concept could be considered valid as a traveler from Absalom. So get creative. This is one of the adventures where really any character concept goes, because Absalom is such a melting pot of peoples. Now we'll be moving on to the mechanical portion of the video, and like I said earlier, there will be some incredibly minor spoilers moving forward. Absolutely nothing specific, but I will be recommending skill checks that are useful to have proficiency in, some monster types that will be common in the adventure, as well as my top 3 and bottom 3 recommended classes. Now, don't let those top 3 or bottom 3 dissuade you from any class you might want to play. These are just A, my opinion, and B, the gap isn't that wide. This adventure is so well designed that almost any class will have many chances to shine. Additionally, I'll only be preparing you for the first book. It would be no fun if I warned you of everything to come in this 10-level adventure, but hopefully the advice given here lets you enjoy your first few sessions in this adventure and be a little bit prepared for the start while leaving the latter half of the adventure exciting. So let's go ahead and jump right into it straight away with the most common types of enemies you're going to find in this first book. Far and away, the two most common types of enemies are Fae and Undead. And these two enemy types come with a ton of inherent immunities, resistances, and weaknesses. The Undead are of course immune to poison, but there's also a lot more creatures besides them who share this immunity. I would not recommend a character who relies heavily on poison damage, at least in this first book. Likewise, Undead have all of the common Undead resistances and immunities, but some of them do have a weakness to positive damage, though keep in mind, Pathfinder 2e is a little tricky. Only some Undead have a weakness to positive damage, though to my knowledge, none of them resist it. Likewise, Cold Iron is always a good choice against the Fae if you can get your hands on it. They basically have an allergy to the material Cold Iron, so the sooner you can get a weapon made of that material, the better. Also be ready for some monsters with nasty little tricks. There are a good chunk of monsters who have an inherent resistance to either all physical damage or sometimes all damage. Most of these monsters do have a way to circumvent it, but I'm not going to tell you how to do that here. Figure it out. Similarly, a surprising amount of monsters are immune to magic. Not enough that it makes spellcasters completely useless, but if you're playing a spellcaster, I highly recommend you have some support spells on backup to power up your frontline fighters, or just bring a solid weapon with you can bring out when they happen to be immune to magic missile. When it comes to skill proficiency, it's kind of hard to pick a top 3 I recommend, because this dungeon does such a good job of making every skill useful, but it is still inherently a dungeon crawler, and 3 skills do stand out just a little bit above the rest. The first one I recommend is Society. Society may not help you a lot in combat. You know, you're not going to identify monsters with Society, and there's no aggressive tactics you can use with Society. But there's a lot of hidden information within this adventure that can only be gleaned with a successful Society skill check. If you don't have at least one person on your team with Society as a skill proficiency, you're going to be missing out on a lot of story. Next is Religion. I already mentioned that Undead are a common enemy type, and they're often identified with the Religion skill. There are so many enemies in this adventure that need Religion recall knowledge specifically to identify them. There's also a ton more useful skill checks that require Religion, but I'm going to leave you to figure out what those are. Finally, at the end of the day, it's a dungeon crawl. There's gonna be locked doors, there's gonna be locked chests, and there's going to be traps galore. Thievery will do so much to help you through this dungeon, and I'd say if your team doesn't have at least one person with Thievery, you are going in with a heavy disadvantage. Honestly, the Thievery skill is so useful, there are straight up encounters that can be skipped if you roll high enough Thievery in the right place. Alright, it's time to close this video out with the big one, my top 3 and bottom 3 recommended classes for Abomination Vaults. Now remember, the bottom 3 aren't even that low. This adventure is well designed, every single class can shine, but these are just the 3 that I think would be the least impressive in the majority of situations. Coming in at my 3rd least recommended class for Abomination Vaults is the Investigator. Honestly, Abomination Vaults has so much happening at any given time. It might sound cool that the Investigator can give themselves a +1 to pursue up to 2 different leads. The problem is that any given floor of the dungeon in Abomination Vaults tends to have maybe 5 to 10 different things going on at once, and if you pursue the wrong lead, and that lead ends in the next room, well, you can't pursue a lead for another 10 minutes. And sure, you could pursue the general idea of the adventure as your lead, but that's only going to apply to a few things. Though I will say, if you can convince your GM that pursuing the Gauntlet gives you a bonus to everything having to do with the environment, that makes Investigator S tier. But it might be a little overpowered. The second least recommended class is unfortunately the Inventor. Inventors at low levels really struggle with damage diversity. Aside from their explosion, they're really just subject to their physical damage of their weapon, which might have 2 damage types, maybe 3 damage types if you take the modular weapon innovation. But until an inventor hits level 9, they do not have a lot of options for different types of damage, and Abomination Vaults really rewards having access to multiple damage types. And unfortunately, they just can't bump their physical damage up. A barbarian can get through resistances by sheer numbers, and a ranger can whittle high resistant targets away with high accuracy. The inventor doesn't really have any of this, unfortunately, and really struggles at the low levels. But by far, my least recommended class for Abomination Vaults is the Magus. Let's face it, if a bunch of creatures have physical damage resistance, and then a bunch of creatures have magical immunities, then everywhere you look, the creatures are going to shut down part of your kit. If they're resistant to physical damage, your attacks aren't going to be useful. If they're immune to magic, you can't even use Spell Strike. Couple all of that with the fact that the Magus is so small in the resource department, only getting a max of 4 spells per day, when you might be having 4 or 5 encounters per day, they could really struggle to keep up with the rest of the party, and it would just feel bad for every single enemy you fight to counter you in some way. But we're going to end this on a positive note with my top 3 recommended classes for the Abomination Vaults adventure, starting with the most obvious one, which I'm sure all of you guessed, the Cleric. But don't worry, I'm not just giving Cleric the number 3 spot because they can cast so many heal spells. Yes, in a dungeon dive, that is so freaking useful to be level 1 with 5 heal spells, but they do a lot more than that, part of which being Religion baked into their kit and Wisdom being their primary ability score. Those coupled together will handle all those tricky religion checks I mentioned earlier. On top of that, the Divine spell list specifically has a ton of anti-undead options, spells that deal decent damage on their own, but when specifically targeting undead can just absolutely nuke a target, making the Cleric a really effective damage dealer in Abomination Vaults. But what if you had the ability to heal? Take advantage of undead weaknesses, and take advantage of weaknesses of a bunch of other creatures. Well, then you'd be playing the Alchemist, my second most recommended class for Abomination Vaults. Honestly, if you have a character who can make healing potions, who can make items that deal damage to other creatures and take advantage of weaknesses, and can distribute those items around the party, then suddenly everyone is more useful in combat. I haven't counted yet, but I'll put it above me just how many damage types alchemists have access to at level 1, including positive damage. They can deal with the undead just like the clerics, and they can even hand those bombs to someone like the fighter or the inventor who might be struggling to get over some damage resistance. Sure, they can't heal quite as many hit points as a cleric's heal spell, but the sheer number of consumables they can make per day, I believe 10 right at level 1 per day, just makes them such a useful Swiss Army knife to have in a dungeon. But what if you had the ability to heal? Take advantage of undead weaknesses, take advantage of other weaknesses creatures might have, and inflict weaknesses on creatures who don't currently have a weakness. Well, then you'd be playing the most powerful class for the Abomination Vaults adventure, the Thaumaturge. The Thaumaturge will just wreck house in the Abomination Vaults adventure. They can always invent a weakness for an enemy to take bonus damage from their attacks, or if they roll high enough, just make their attacks trigger weaknesses. So many enemies in this adventure, on top of having crazy resistances and immunities, usually come with a specific weakness. When your Thaumaturge's dagger can just inflict fire damage when they need it to, it's insane! Sure, the Alchemist can do something specific, but the Alchemist needs to prepare for it. The Thaumaturge can just snap their finger and say, okay, I do fire damage now. The Thaumaturge will never find themselves in a situation where they just can't do something. Add on top of that the crazy shenanigans their implements can add, like teleporting with the mirror or healing with the chalice, and the Thaumaturge is someone you absolutely want on your side in the Abomination Vaults adventure. And there you go! Now you are ready to play the Abomination Vaults Adventure Path. I really want to hear how you and your group do. I hope you have a blast, and if you've already played it and want to share some more information in the comments, try to keep it spoiler-free. Feel free to share your stories in the comments below, or tell me about the character you plan to play in your Abomination Vaults adventure. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons and YouTube members for financially supporting the channel. If you would like to join them, there is a join button right below this video where you can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Sincerely, thank you all so much for watching the content. I've been really into it lately. You know, I've got the green screen going on, and I've had a lot of fun experimenting with my content recently. So sincerely, thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.